Yeah, hi team, good morning. Hope you guys are doing good practice. And today we are going to learn one more important topic that is called a block scope. Okay, so far we have discussed what is scope and what is a global scope, what is a local scope. Okay, and now this is the time to understand what is a block scope. Okay, so before going to enter into the block scope, I will just revise what is scope and what is a global scope and what is a local scope, then how it is different from a block scope. So then it will be more easy to remember for you. Okay, I'm just writing simple, I'm just declaring few variables where a is equal to 10 and var b is equal to 20. Okay, so and now I'm doing console.log of a and console.log of b. Okay, so always we should remember whenever, because the scope and execution context are very close to each other. So if you understand both the things, it's easy. You can understand uh, all the related topics to the scope and scope with the execution context. So first, if we execute this one, we don't get any problem and you will get the output because because A and B are there in a global execution context and you are accessing those variables from global execution context. Okay, from where you're calling, and the scope means what are the things, what are the variables and functions or methods you can access in that execution context. That is called a scope. Okay, so if you see, I will try to debug this one so that it's easy. So sources, just put a debugger and refresh. Okay, if you see here, whenever the global execution context has created in the memory, in the call stack, automatically it will provide a scope for you. That means it will provide a memory, separate memory for that execution context. Okay, that is called scope. So in this, suppose right now you are at line number 22. Suppose if you are trying to execute line number 22, at the time you should think about two things. One is whether you are in global execution context or whether you are in execution context of any function. Okay, then if you are in global execution context, okay, you will get a separate, you can access few things which are there in that global scope, because global execution context can have a separate memory and local execution context have a separate memory, so that if you are in global execution context you can access only things which are there in that scope, okay. So let me draw the diagram. So this is the call stack, this is the call stack, and whenever you give a JavaScript program, it will create, whenever you give a JavaScript code to the JavaScript engine, it will create a global execution context. Okay, this is this is a global execution context. For every execution context, JavaScript engine provide a separate memory, right? For this global execution context, it is providing, suppose we can draw the memory like this. Okay, log memory. This is not called uh, heap memory or something, because end of the day it is there in uh, either in heap or in the stack memory. But here it will access because it will give this portion, this area to this global execution context. Okay, suppose if you are there in if you purchase a apartment, so that is your scope, right? Suppose maybe a 200 feet or something square feet, that is your area, so that is your house. You should be there in that space only. You can't access, you can't take something outside. Okay, that is the scope. So here this is a simple thing. For global execution context, it will provide a separate memory. Okay, it will provide a separate memory, it will partition or something for you, separate memory. And here there will be a window object. Okay, where there will be a window object. So in this, okay, whatever the variables and methods you declared, whatever the methods and variables you declare in this global execution context, those things will be available in this object. Suppose, for example, we have declared a and b. So what will happen, that a and b available in this window object. So initially it will be undefined. Later, when you are executing at the time, it will be 10 or 20 what you have given. So that means a value will be there in the window, and even if you define any function, that is also there in that scope only. So now understand clearly, this is normally we are drawing, we are trying to understand like this. Okay, this is the global execution context, and it has a separate memory allocation for that. So that is the scope, that is the scope, whatever you can access. Suppose if you are in this position, if you are in global execution context, what are the variables and what are the methods you can access from global execution context is the scope of global execution context. That is the global scope. Suppose it will be, you can understand clearly if you debug. So right now this pointer is pointing to global execution context, if you see. So then automatically it will provide all the information, whatever you can access from global execution context is available in this place, in this section scope. So just expand it. So the scope, so here you have a very big object that is called window, that is provided by the browser, and all the information, all the methods and variables. Suppose if you see a and b are there here, even if you declare any function like this, that is also there in. Suppose a, say hello, say hello, and do like console.log something. Okay, so whenever you give this JavaScript code to the JavaScript engine, okay, it when it will create a global execution context in the call stack. Okay, this is a global execution context here, which you are able to see the anonymous. And and you should be aware of what is the scope of that execution context. So what are the things you can access when you are there in that global execution context? Simply, suppose if you go to the Bangalore, what are the things you can access, what are the things you can find in Bangalore? That is your scope. Suppose if you come to the Hyderabad, so what are the things you can cover in Hyderabad, what are the things you can available? Suppose if you see, if you come to the Hyderabad biryani, you can find a biryani, very good biryani. Of course, maybe you can find a biryani elsewhere, but most of the people prefer to take a biryani when they visit Hyderabad. So that means the scope Hyderabad. The scope means if you come to the Hyderabad, suppose if you come to the Hyderabad, suppose this is a Hyderabad, and immediately you can visualize what is the scope of Hyderabad. So in that Hyderabad, you can find a good biryani or some other food items which are very famous in Hyderabad, and you can find Ramoji Film City, these kind of things, right? So you can't find Ramoji Film City outside, because that is accessible in Hyderabad only. That's so if you want to access Ramoji Film City, you should come to the Hyderabad. In the same way, you can just correlate with other things. Okay, that is the scope. What are the things you can find in that particular place is called. scope. That's simple. So here, when it comes to the JavaScript, when it comes to JavaScript, if your this line is then global execution context, just imagine whenever you are executing any line, you should think about two things. One thing, what is the execution context? Whether it is in global execution context or whether it is in local execution context. So right now this is global execution context, and you should imagine what is the scope of that. What is the scope of that? All the variables and methods which you declare in global execution context is the scope. That's it. So that you can access those things easily. So that is the scope. So now we should understand what is a local scope. So we discussed all these things already, but I'm just revising before entering into the block scope. So suppose you have declared a function called a say hello, okay, and you have declared some other variable where x is equal to good and where y is equal to, okay, morning, and you can combine both the things, okay, x plus y, so it will return good morning, so it will print a good morning. So, and whenever you invoke this function, this is invocation, or whenever you call that function, whenever you call this function, what will happen? It will create another execution context for that function, right? So here, this execution context name is, this is execution context for a say hello function or method. Okay, and immediately you should understand that what is the scope of that execution context, what are the things you can access from here. Suppose if you are here, suppose previously if you are here, so that you can access all the things which are there in window, that's fine. And right now from Hyderabad to, you went to a Bangalore. Suppose right now you are there in Bangalore, so of course the whatever the examples I will say in the real time, maybe it doesn't correlate in each and every situation. So just understanding purpose I'm saying, but just focus on the exact concept. So hey, say hello. Suppose whenever you are there in execution context of this a say hello, for that also it will create another, it will allocate, because what are the variables and methods available you have declared in that scope will be available in separate scope, that is called local scope. So this is a local scope, this is a local scope for that function. Suppose even if you have 100 functions, if you invoke any function, it will create a separate execution context and it will create a separate local scope. So then here just imagine what are the things you have declared in this, x and y, x and y, so that these x and y will be available in this scope. X is available here and y also will be available here. But here we should understand one important topic, that is apart from scope plus you should understand lexical scope. So by by combining that, you can say that what is the scope of this global execution context. Now if you see, just imagine what is the scope of this execution context means. Okay, if you are there in this place, and naturally this pointer also will move to the top, pointer also will move to the top. Here you should imagine that, suppose if you are there here, what are the things, what are the variables and methods you can access from this place, that is your scope, that is the scope of this line. Suppose right now, suppose just if you are executing this line of statement, at the time you should imagine what is the scope of this line. Suppose what is, because you are trying to access x and y, so here the scope means what are the variables, So you can access x and y. Even if you define any other function here, so that is also you can access. So the scope means what are the things, what are the simple two things, what are the variables and methods, because we are dealing with methods and variables itself. So what are the variables and methods you can access from this location, that is the scope for this line. Okay, so right now here you are in local execution context of, and you can access what are the variables you declared here. Okay, because you are in that same locality, no problem. And here one super important thing is, if you are in execution context of any function, you can access things which are there in local scope, plus what JavaScript engine is doing beautifully, it is giving this scope also to you. Okay, it is giving this scope also to you. Okay, I think I will give a copy. So it will give a exact copy to you. So now for global execution context, what is the scope? This what is there window object is the scope. And for this one, what are the things, what are the variables and what are the methods you define in this particular place? You can access those things, plus you can access which are there in this window object also, because this execution context is a children of global execution context, because these are natural resources anyone can access from any place in the world. In the same way, if you declare any variable and any method, you can access from any location or any place in the whole JavaScript code. So whenever you are creating this, whenever the execution context has created, automatically it will provide a separate scope for that. And again, you can access this global execution context scope also. So simple. So here, whenever you are going to the college, you are taking money from your father. Okay, this is your father's account. Once you got the job, because this is father's income, this is your income. And once you get a job, you can utilize your money. At the same time, till that time also, in that time also, if you need any money, you can ask money from your father also. So that, because father is always ready to give a money for kids before getting a job or after getting a job or after losing the job or whatever throughout your life, right? Parents will give. Normally kids don't give to the parent. That's the different situation sometimes. Okay, so this is the scope of this local execution context. So here what we can say, the scope of this execution context means this local scope plus lexical scope. Lexical scope means your parent scope. Okay, who is the parent of this execution context? Global execution context is the parent. Of course, we can say what, who is the parent of this global execution context? Suppose not, no one is there. Is no one is there here, because he is the supreme. So the parent for this window object is null. No one is there to help God, because suppose in universe the God is a supreme God. If you imagine, he is the first person and he is the only person who can control the world. So who will help him? So who is the father of that? We don't know. In this situation, we can say that it's a null. Okay, here you can imagine this is a God, and you can correlate with up to some extent. Okay, but to understand the concept only. So if you understand things in JavaScript, don't think about all the other unnecessary topics. So if it is very difficult to understand the topic in JavaScript explanation, so you can correlate, you can take some examples and you can remember for more time. So this is a local scope. So we can see though the same thing in the browser as well. So if you see, whenever you are in global execution context, in the scope, it will clearly show you what are the things you can access from this global execution context. The blue tick is pointing into the global execution context. At that situation, it will clearly shows the scope. Okay, what are the things you can access from global execution context is your scope. That's a simple explanation. Now, whenever you invoke this function, whenever you, okay, I think I need to refresh one more time. So, whenever you reach this line, whenever you reach this line, so now I'm invoking the function. So before invocation, we don't have a execution context. So I just got invoked that execution context. Now, if you see, this is pointing to local execution context of a say hello. Fine. Now it is clearly shown what are the things you can access. You can access your local memory, and you can access your father's account details also. You can take help from your father also. That is the scope. So here, this is the scope of a execution context of a say hello, plus he can access his lexical scope. He can take help from his parent also. That facility is available in JavaScript. So this is the whole thing. We can call it as a scope. S- Means your scope plus your lexical scope combinedly, we can call it as a scope. So here, this is your scope, and this is a lexical scope. By combining these two scopes, like your own scope, your own bank account, plus your father's assets. Suppose if your father has 10 acres, you can access those 10 acres, right? If your father has a car, you can access that one also. So your account details and your bike plus your father's car and assets, those things also your assets. So then you can say that your scope means your local scope plus your parent scope also. Okay, I hope you guys understood what is scope and what is a lexical scope, and now you should understand what is scope chain. Scope chain means simple. So if you don't have a money, if you're not able to find a variable in this scope, you are going back to your parent scope, right? So this is a chain. Of course, we have only two things here. Now if I declare one more thing, here, I'm just declaring one more function. Function uh, we can say good message. Okay, whatever it is. So here again, I'm just declaring var g is equal to 78, and var h is equal to 99. Okay, and if I do console.log, okay, g something. So if you see here, if you can access, because this is your scope. Okay, imagine this is your execution context. It will create execution context for you, and it will allocate the memory for g and h so that you can access it. That is your local scope. With the help of this lexical scope, because if you don't find a variable, suppose if you try to access x, then what will happen? So this x is not there in this scope, so that it will go and find that variable from his parent. Because wherever you invoking this function, wherever you invoking the function, right now you are invoking the good message at line number 33. So this good message you are invoking, so it will create a execution context, right? It will create I will show you in the browser itself. It will create a separate execution context. So who is the parent of this good message? Who is the parent of this? The say hello, right? Who is the parent? So right now, observe carefully that good message is there in say hello. Say hello. So wherever you invoke, wherever I'm saying, wherever you invoke, wherever you are executing, wherever you are calling that function, that is very important. So who is the parent of this? A say hello. And who is the parent of a say hello? That is global execution context. So if you can't find a variable here, is a grandchild. Suppose grandchild is there, he also got the job, of course, after few years. So he can access this grandparent. grandchild can access his own money if he don't have money, so he can take help from his father. Even father also don't have money, he can go and take money from grandparent. So that is scope chain. So if you see, whenever you invoke this function, it will create another execution context on top of execution context of say hello, because this execution context which you we have created for say hello will be gone only after you exit from this function. Okay, don't worry, this is too much explanation. Sometimes it will be fall into the confusion, but you can watch these videos multiple times so that you will understand clearly. So then what will happen whenever it reaches this position to execution? So it will, because still we didn't came out of this function at the time of executing this one. So what will happen? It will create another execution context here on top of it. So if this is a grandparent, this is a parent, this is a child. So for this also you can find some local scope. And here the beauty of this JavaScript is, along with your scope, okay, along with your scope, it will give a copy of your parents details, parent scope, and their parent scope also. So here you can find, so for this, suppose if you're in this position, whenever right now you are in execution context of, right now if you are in execution context of good message, what are the things you need to consider? For this execution context, you should have a separate memory. So here G will be available here and H will be available here. And still you can access X and Y also. Even you can access A and B also, because X and Y are there in your parents account details and A and B are there in your grandparent account details, because you came from, your father came from your grandfather and you came from your father. That's why they are ready to share their assets and money also to you. So but if you see, if you don't find in this scope, you can go to this scope. If you don't find here, you can go to the grandparent. This is called scope chain, but it is in one order. So you can, you this unidirectional. Okay, this is very important. This is very important. So if you don't find, suppose grandchild don't have a money, he can take from his father. If this person don't have a money, he can take from his father. But unfortunately, if grandparent don't have a money, he can't take from his child. If a father don't have a money, he can't access your bank details. So this is one direction. You can, because it is not going to be in an opposite direction. So that is a scope chain. So scope chain means if you don't find here, you can go here. If you don't find here, you can go here. That is a scope chain. So here in this discussion, we understand what is scope and what is global scope and what is a local scope also. So local scope means simply blindly, if whenever you invoke a method or a function, it will create another execution context for you. So whatever the variables you declare in that function, those things will be available in that particular scope. And you can access your parents and grandparents scope information also, that is called lexical scope. And the process you can access from your parent, and your parent can access from your grandparent. This chain is called a scope chain. So if you understand these three concepts, then we can enter into a, another very good important scope, that is called a block scope. So but just give me confirmation, understood? Or because already I have explained these things in separate video, but maybe I'm not sure, that's why. Sir, I'm not able to see your, this is today, yesterday one. Okay, hi Adya. Just tell me, understood? Okay, fantastic. Let me check if anyone is there in live. Yeah, just give me confirmation. Suppose, yeah, if you understand, just ping me. Yes, if you have any question, just ping me. What is your question? So that I will look into that. Okay, I will explain one more time for you. So now, okay, take a breathe for a minute and just take a break for 30 seconds. Okay, just relax. Okay, before going to a block scope. Okay, I hope if you understand, just keep things in your mind separately. Once you understand what is a block and what is a block scope, then again we can correlate everything. Okay, just a minute. Who are watching this video later, just maybe just move for a 30 seconds or 1 minute. I'm just waiting over there. Understood or not? I'm not sure whether because it will take some delay. Okay, fine. This is enough. This break is enough. Now we should understand what is a block and what is a block scope. So if you see, this is very very simple. This is very very simple. Suppose I'm writing a if condition. So if I do 10 is greater than 5, that is true, right? So then immediately what we are doing, we are opening some curly brace and we are doing console.log. Okay, console.log 10. Okay, 10 is big. Okay, and you're immediately you can write else and the console.log. Okay, we are writing the 5 is big. So here this is a block. Okay, this is a block. But if you see, without this curly brace also it will work. So first I will show you, I will execute this code. This is very very interesting. This is very very interesting. Just refresh. Okay, I'm just removing the breakpoints. Go to the console, refresh the things. So 10 is big, it's working. This is a valid syntax anyway, we are using block. But now what I'm doing, I'm just removing this block, this curly brace. Okay, observe carefully. Okay, this is also valid in JavaScript. Just refresh. Still it is saying 10 is big. So for to cross check, I'm just putting 11 and here I'm just putting 11. Okay, so if you see, you're getting the exact output properly. So then what is the need of a block? What is the need of a curly brace? Means for if condition, we need a one statement. Once it is successful, we need one statement. Suppose if you see, suppose if you don't write any statement, suppose if you don't write any statement here, just if you write just if 11 greater than 5, then immediately it will throw an error. It is saying that unexpected end of input. That means you didn't complete the statement properly. That means this if condition is expecting one statement. Okay, one statement. Suppose if you write this one true, okay, he's happy. He is happy. He's not going to say anything. So, but naturally, what we will do if something is condition is successful, we can write like console.log. We can give some message. Okay, some good. Let's refresh. It's good. Okay. And here in some situations you want to do more things. Okay, based on some conditions. So if this is true, sometimes you need to execute two or three statements together, because this is if and this is else. And here, okay, here if you want to execute only one statement, okay, if you want to execute one statement, no problem, this is perfectly valid syntax. But in some situations you want to execute a group of statements at a time, means if this is true, you should execute this group of statements. If it is false, you need to execute these group of statements. So the we are going to use a block to group the statements into one. So because naturally this if is expecting only one statement, either it will be one line statement or 10 line statement, doesn't matter, it will treat as okay, I'm very happy. So if you give a one statement, I will execute all the things in a sequence or in a one shot. So else also will expect the same thing, if you give something, I will execute those things in one shot. So if you have a more than one statements you want to execute, like compound statement, so that what we can do, you can group together, you can group like this. This is the block. So what is a block means? Okay, if you want to execute, if you want to group multiple statements as a one statement, okay, then we can go for a block. So naturally, even if you have one statement, that's a habit for us. Maybe in C language somewhere, maybe that is mandatory to mention curly braces. I'm not sure. But in JavaScript, that is not mandatory. If you have one statement, you don't need to use a block. But if you want to group multiple statements, suppose console.log hello, and then again if you do console.log, okay, bye bye. So these three statements are there. Right now, if you want to, because if you put a semicolon and if you complete this statement like this is one statement. So if you have a block, no problem. Suppose if you don't have a block, so if you see, if you don't have a block, it will throw an error. Okay. If 11 is greater than 5, okay, it will consider this only. Okay, these things are not related to if block. Okay, I will write in a neat manner. Suppose if you see, maybe you think that these three things are for if only. Okay, so I will give else block. Suppose 2 greater than 5. Okay, in this situation, it doesn't execute this line because it will consider only this is the asset of this if block. Okay, so if you see, hello, bye bye, we got the hello and bye bye because these two statements are not following this if block. So 2 greater than 5, it is a false, that's why it is not executing this one. Okay, but we are getting these two lines because these two lines are not following if block. So if you want to group these things, so if this is false, we should not execute. If whenever it is true, then only we should execute. So before we got the output like this, hello and bye bye. Now you don't get any output here because these three statements are following the if block. So whenever you feel, whenever in JavaScript, whenever it is required to group multiple statements into one statement, then in that situation you should go for a block. Okay, this is a simple definition for the block. Okay, then what is the block scope? Okay, already we understand scope, and we understand, okay, in that scope we got few interesting things. We know what is global scope. And we know what is local scope now, and what is the third type of scope, that is a block scope. Then what is the significance of this? So here, that means whatever the variables and method you declare, you can access in this block, that is called block scope. So if you see, if you write a function, say hello, okay, just now we understand, right? So if you declare var x is equal to 10 and var y equal to 20, you know, right? What is the scope here? This is a local scope, because it is a function, that's why we can treat it as a local scope. And what is the scope of this execution context? Means what are the variables and methods you can access inside of that is the scope. So here also, this block is also providing some security, or some, it is allocating separate memory for the block, so that you can secure those variables. But why we need to secure the variables? Because okay, global scope is fine and function scope is fine, because a function is a specific task, so that if you want any separate variables, we can store that, we can declare variables and we can utilize it. But what is the need of introducing another scope called block? Okay, I will tell you one simple example. If you see, I'm writing a for loop. So if you see, I'm writing for loop for var I equal to 0, okay, I less than or equal to 10, or even I will give a simple thing, I less than 4 and I plus plus. Here I'm writing console.log console.log of I. Okay, console.log of I. So let's execute that one. So you got 0, 1, 2, 3. This is perfect. 0, 1, 2, 3, perfect. So, but if you see here, if I write console.log outside the for loop, and if I try to access this I, because this is declared for only for loop. Okay, after that I don't need this I, because I've just declared I for to finish this for loop. So I want to iterate something for a couple of times, and after that I don't need that I variable. But here if you see, so previously it is 0, 1, 2, 3, and at this point, you can access it outside for loop. Okay, outside for loop. So for loop, refresh. So if you see, you are able to see that information outside of for loop also. What is the need of that? No need, because in any situation we don't use like this. So this is unnecessary thing. So for that they have introduced a new scope, that is called block scope, so that if you declare, okay, if you declare a variable with let or a constant, because var is introduced in 1995, but let and constant were introduced in 2015, so that by the time they understand the problems of some problems with the var, so it is giving a lot of options, so it is allowing to redeclare. Okay, a lot of confusion is going to happen. That's why in ES6 features, whenever they introduce a let and constant, at the time they realize that okay, we should avoid this one also. So that what they have introduced a new scope, that is called a block scope. So if you declare a variable with let, you can't access outside this for loop. Okay, so we can avoid lots of unnecessary things. So if you see, it will throw an error. I is not defined. That means you can't access a variable if you declare in block, because of course don't think that Raghu you didn't declare here. Okay, even if you declare inside this block or here also, it will indirectly it will be there here itself. Okay, it will in that scope itself. So that means this let and constants are following block scope, and you can't access those things outside of that block. So now we can go on debug the code. So of course, if you declare with a var, okay, no problem, you can access it. But yesterday or I think in few sessions back, I've said once you understand let and constant, you should not use a var unless until you know the real it is real part, unless until it is very very important to handle that situation. So I think 99.99% we should not use a var at all in modern day programming. That's why we should understand what is the importance of let and constant. Okay, let and constants don't allow to redeclare with the same variable, and let and constant will follow a block scope. Okay, another thing we understand yesterday, I will cover that one also now. So let's see, first of all, what will happen in the memory, what is happening in the memory. Of course we are not able to access outside, but what is happening in the memory, let's see. So I'm just declaring just a block here. Okay, even this is also valid syntax in JavaScript. If you provide if block or else block or a while or a for loop or a switch, fine. For understanding purpose, this is also fine. Okay, suppose I'm declaring where a is equal to 10, and I'm just declaring let a b is equal to 20, and the constant c is equal to 30. So here, of course, it's better to add one condition to avoid the confusion for you. So I'm just doing 10 is greater than 5. So 10 is always greater than 5, so that we will enter into this block. So let's see what is happening. Okay, here outside also I'm just declaring some variable where x is equal to triple one. Okay, ax something. Okay, now we can go and check the memory sources and put a breakpoint here and refresh. Now if you see, we don't have any other execution context. Right now we are in global execution context only. We are in global execution context only. And whenever you are there inside the block, okay, you are getting another scope here, another extra scope here. Okay, that is the beauty of a JavaScript. So it is providing some extra space, and it is very strict. So you can access and observe carefully in that global scope. This a, x, and a is attached to window object, and ax is attached to the window object itself, because we are in global execution context only. Okay, this is not a local execution context or something, because for the function, whenever you invoke the function, it will create the execution context, separate execution context. For the block, it doesn't execute, it doesn't create any other execution context. You are there in the same execution context, but still you can, it will provide a separate extra memory, and it will be more secure. So observe carefully here. Let and suppose if you declare with let and constant, those things will be available in this block. B is undefined, C is undefined. Here in the global scope, A is also undefined and AX is also undefined. So if you declare a variable with var inside the block or outside the block in the global execution context, it will be attached to the window object. If it is attached to the window object, you can access anywhere in the program. But here, let and constants are more strict than a var, so it will be available in this block scope. So you can't access outside the block. So we can see that one. So once you come out of this block, it will be gone. This latent constant, that memory you can't access outside. So here now I'm writing console.log console. So, okay, this I will remove. It will give some extra confusion to you. So console.log of A and console.log of B and console.log of C. So you can't find any problem here because, so I'm just removing the breakpoint, refresh the console. You got 10 and 20 and 30 because simply if you don't find a variable, just a minute. So if you see where A, it is in global execution context, it is attached to window object, no problem, you can access it. And now in the block, so it will allocate the memory for B. Okay, B is equal to 20, and it is allocating memory for C also. So now A value will be 10, B value will be 20, is 20, and C value is 30. And now whenever you are trying to access, because you are there in the block, happily you can access A. Because you are there in the same block, you can happily access B. And because you are there in the same block, so that you can access C. Once you complete executing this statement, you are coming out of that, right? So now observe carefully, that block scope is gone. That block scope is gone, so that you can access B and C outside. So now you can observe carefully. I'm just writing these three lines outside. If I try to access A, B, and C, what will happen? Because A is attached to the window object, we can't find error here. This is good. Here, while executing this statement, okay, once you come out of this block, whatever the memory it is allocated for B and C, it will be gone. It will be gone. You can't access that here. So you can experience that with debugging. So right now, clearly observe here, we have a in the scope we have two things, one is global and one is block, and B and C are there in the block scope. Okay, and whenever you execute these lines, okay, no problem for us. A and B and C, still this block is there, this memory is available, it is showing this memory B and C. Now once I came out of this block, once I reach line number 31, once we come out of this block, automatically this memory will be gone. So now if you see, at this situation right now we are at line number 31, the whatever the memory is available in that block scope, that is gone already from the memory. So if you try console.log A, we don't have any problem. We don't have any problem. And if you try to access B, if you try to access B, what it will do, it will search in the global scope. And if you can't find that B in this, because that is gone, this B and C are there in the block scope. Once we come out of this block, that memory is deleted. That memory is no longer available. And if you try to access this, it will throw an error because you can't find B. So what it's saying, B is not defined. So I'm not able to find B in that particular scope because was declared in the block, and whenever you come out of that block, that memory is gone. So this is called a block scope. So the biggest advantage with the block scope is, normally maybe you can say that, Raghu, what is the problem? Okay, I can declare some variables in the if block. If anyone access outside that block, what will be the problem? So normally, just imagine, in some situation, suppose I'm writing some details like your salary details or something based on some condition. Suppose if your performance is good, and then I'm just giving some information. Okay, for those people only, I'm sharing the bonus details. I'm giving some extra chocolates or something. And at the time, HR people will say that, okay, we are giving this to you only particularly. Don't reveal to anyone. Of course, everyone is there in the same office, and because you did some extra work, for that they have given some small gift. Of course, if it is a bonus or something, that is different. So if they are giving a small gift, uh, sometimes they will say that, please don't reveal to others. Maybe it is, if you reveal, it's not a big deal, but only thing is, the people who don't get that gift, they will feel bad, right? For that common sense, in some situations in our life, we will say that, okay, don't reveal to others. So here also, unnecessary thing. So if we declare anything in a if block or for loop, definitely we are not going to use those variables outside. We should not use it actually. We should not use it. That's why, to avoid the common mistakes in JavaScript with var, so in ES6 features, they have introduced another extra scope called block. So just remember, whenever we are in block scope, it is not going to create a separate execution context. So execution context will be created only for the functions. And this local scope is different and block scope is different. And people will ask me the question definitely, Raghu, for the function also, for the function, say hello. Okay, say hello. Okay, we are writing. Okay, we are writing like this, right? Okay, whether we can consider that this is a block. Okay, no, this is a function. This is a function body. Of course, we can treat as a block, but function has a specific function is have more power than in all normal blocks. So because it is creating a separate execution context. So whenever you are dealing with the functions, just think that it has a execution context and it has a separate memory. And even inside the function also, normally we will use if block, right? So at the time, yes, we can access variables whatever you declare in this if block. Okay, you can't access outside. So everywhere same rules. So of course, in this one explanation, it's going to be very heavy. No problem, just try to understand, just to try to watch this video 1 or 2 times, you will understand it. And please do practice. Okay, without practicing, without checking in the browser, without debugging, you can't understand the concept, you can't remember. So that is not my responsibility. So that is your responsibility. If you want to learn properly, you should do hard work. Okay, uh, are they understood, or who are there in the live? Okay, Ramgi said understood. Fantastic. So that's all for today. And tomorrow we are going to come up with another beautiful concept. But if you want to understand that concept, please revise all these things. Okay. Thank you and see you tomorrow. Bye bye.